Howdy. Thanks for listening to Let the Movie Speak. Before we get started, we'd like to ask a favor of you.
It's a simple favor. If you could just rate and review our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you listen, that might help other ears get into our ecosystem here and hear another episode. Anyway, enjoy the show.
Let the movie speak.
Hello, everybody, listeners far and wide. Welcome back to another episode of Let the Movie Speak. My name's Travis.
I have been Justin.
Have been, but today that may change. We'll see.
We will. It remains to be seen. You know, Travis, often we come here really excited to, discuss a movie of merit and to hopefully, open somebody's eyes maybe to a movie they haven't seen before or something.
Right.
But today I feel like our task even transcends that.
Yeah.
This is a bit like, we've heard about great things in history. There's some guys that discovered DNA. Big whoop.
Yeah, big whoop.
Here we're going to be talking about a film for the ages. And so I hope people will just fasten their seatbelts, shut up.
Yeah.
Put the coffee down
Yep.
and just listen, because
Yeah.
this movie is really gonna. I'm a little bit speechless, frankly, Travis. I don't know what your thoughts are. Maybe you can help me
No,
out
I
here.
agree. I think we're going to split the podcast atom. I mean, there's no question
Yeah.
about it. It's it's a monumental achievement, and it's second to none, even though it spawned 8 sequels.
Yeah, exactly. And so I feel bad that we even have to kind of go through the format of our podcast,
Yeah.
but I think we do have to talk about other stuff, unfortunately, before we get there.
It's a real bummer. But
Yeah.
let's before we crack open this golden walnut, let's give a little insight for our loyal listeners into what we watched this week. How does that sound? Does that sit well with you?
Frankly, no.
Okay.
I'm pissed, Travis. I really, I feel like, time is money, and people are dying everywhere in the
Yeah.
world right now.
No, that's true.
And I just really, it's fine. Let's talk about what we watched. Okay.
Yeah, I don't mean to impose on your time or anything, but we do have a show to run. So I continued watching WandaVision, and I think you did too.
Oh,
Should we start there?
I think. Let's see. There might be. What are we up to now? Episode 8.
Yeah, almost to the finish line, and
Okay.
So I think it's been 2 weeks since we last recorded discussing about
Yeah.
WandaVision. Everybody and their mother will have watched it by now, so this is all very hindsight. But
Yeah.
so we had episode 7, which was called Breaking the Fourth Wall, and we had episode 8, which was called Previously On. So we could just kind of go in order. Episode 7 was structured and stylized like a modern comedy, is that
Yes.
modern still? Like a 10-year-old comedy, let's say. All of those talking head kind of cutaway interview shows like, The Office and Parks and Rec and that style.
Yeah.
Maybe Modern Family would be another one. This is like very similar to, even the theme song is it's like a direct Office ripoff. And
Absolutely.
of all of the let's call them homages up until this point, this is, I think, one of the flimsier ones for me, because the episode's fine.
Yeah.
It's not a bad episode, but like there's like, it's like the Vanilla Ice and Queen thing with dun 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 dun, dun, dun. Like it's so close to the Office theme that I don't even, like, I can barely see the seams between.
Yeah. That's fair.
But as an episode, I thought it was fine. We've both expressed our mid-season concerns, and
Yes.
at this point, I feel like this really goes for both of these episodes, but especially in episode 7, it's kind of like if they never gave us episode 4, which was so imbalanced, and it's like time spent outside of Wanda World, outside of Westview, and then inside. This is like the balance that maybe the show should have achieved all along.
Yes.
in some ways.
Yes.
I did find one line to be very ironic, though, because we both liked the fact that Wanda pushed the barriers out in episode
Right.
6 and, like, swallowed up the military force. And we were like, oh, great. It's like, shake the Etch-a-Sketch, get rid of all that stuff that's not all that interesting. But then, like, you see, like, I don't know what percentages of them survive that, but there's enough of them, and General Generic makes it through, makes it out not brainwashed in a way. And there's a line where they're standing on their higher hill now, looking down into the bigger hex, and he says, like, lucky for us, she pumped the brakes. And I'm like, well, I don't know, I'm not so sure. But
Right.
What did you think of episode 7?
Yeah, well, like you too, I was a little disappointed that, at the end of episode 6, it's really just like him and a couple other goons in a truck, right? And they're trying to outrun the Hex expansion pack. And then all of a sudden, he says that line that you just alluded to, and there's like a gazillion times more military people and equipment, and, it's like, okay, I guess so much. They shook the Etch-a-Sketch, but that was because the delivery truck had just arrived with a gazillion more Etch-a-Sketches.
With a giant Etch-a-Sketch.
Right. And so, yeah, I would agree. I liked episode 7, especially the stuff that was in Wanda World. And I feel like though they aped in a really good way a lot of the stuff from The Office and from some of those other sitcoms we mentioned, it's so fresh in our cultural consciousness. And just in time apart from it, frankly, maybe not even a decade for some of those series. So it's a little. I feel like it's not as on point because they don't have. I think the more time you have away from that stuff, the more you're able to really glean, like, hey, that really worked.
Nostalgia.
That is what's that's what's really important there. And so because we don't have that, I don't think it's necessarily as strong.
Yeah.
But, I did enjoy, I think our favorite character, Mrs. Astrophysicist Ghostbuster Lady, is made a lot more tolerable inside Wanda World.
Yes.
And so that was welcome, at least in my book. What was not welcome isn't this, okay, is it 7 or 8? So apologize if I got this mixed up. 7 or 8 where Monica Rambeau tries to drive a truck into the
Oh my
Hex.
gosh, that's 7. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about that sequence.
No sense.
It's so dumb. And again, like, I don't want to say like we told you so, but everything that happens outside of the dome is just not interesting. Like, it's not it's not what makes the show good. No one's favorite moments in the show are going to be the technology they use to try to surveil what happens inside. Like, it's just not. And it's like a couple things. Okay, first of all, the costume design of like what the people from S.W.O.R.D. wear is so Power Rangers ridiculous. Like I get that it's Marvel and this is comic book stuff, and but they do fix things, right? Like, they modernize things, and superhero costumes that we see in the tentpole films and even in this show, like they tone some of that down so that it just makes a little bit more sense in the world that they're building. But like, they are Power Ranger like style, like ridiculous, like spacesuit looking things. And the truck is like, I just wrote down, so the sword chick can just drive a space rover. They said they retrofitted a space rover. She's essentially like a cop for them. I don't know how she can just. She literally hops in and just is like full throttle. Like, what is that?
And there's no good explanation for why it's like, the way they shoot that, even when the truck rolls out, it's like, did you get it ready? Yeah, here you go. And it's like dun 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 dun. like we're at a monster truck rally, and it's
Right.
like, this is not it. Who cares?
Yeah,
It's just
who
a
cares?
freaking truck.
Yeah.
And then it's the FBI guy is like, hey, what? Are you sure that's going to be able to get through? Because apparently he's the only sane person there.
Right.
And the lady in like multicam, I don't know if she's from the army or what. She's like, oh yeah, this is our most heavily armored space rover. It'll cut through it like butter or something like that. And it's like, what are you talking about? The heck, no, Vision can't even get out of the hex, or no one can go in. But your space, like what?
I guess it's a character moment. It's not like they're like just slobbering over their like prop design, with the truck and everything. But the whole point of that sequence is that she goes through anyway, and and she now is endowed with some special abilities, and like that is a thing that does matter. But to get there was like, so over the top ridiculous. And there's a line when the truck rolls off where she looks at it and she's like, she's perfect. And I just was like, oh no, like that's so ridiculous.
It was bad.
Yeah.
But then we come to, that's kind of about the end of 7, right? Where she goes in to the hex to try to look for Wanda, and Wanda discovers that her neighbor is not all that she seems.
Yeah, that's Catherine Hahn's character. Yes.
Yeah, and so at the end of 8, we can talk about 8 now, I guess. But at the end of 8, we still don't really get a resolution to the very end, the post credits thing from episode 7, where Monica goes to the little dungeon, entrance, whatever, of Agnes / Agatha's house, and then Pietro sees her.
Yeah.
And he says something to her, and then it's over. It's like, okay. So then in this episode, in 8, right, we find out that supposedly Agatha Harkness / Agnes has been kind of deceiving Wanda. Threat on the inside. And it's really interesting because of how powerful these characters are. I don't feel like I really know what she's like, don't forget I have like your children captive, but it's like, are these kids even real at this? Like, I frankly don't have an answer for that. And is her brother like, because Agatha / Agnes makes the comment like, oh, I kind of made your brother up, but it's like, well, did so I don't know if maybe those things are clear and I'm just really dense, but I feel like those things could either be real or not real at this point.
Yeah, it's like a little unreliable narrator thing happening, because she could have just like brainwashed or mind controlled what's his face, rather than like made a what do you call, what's the Last Jedi thing where you can be somewhere where you're not, a astral projection or whatever. I don't think it really matters. Like
probably
if they care to explain it, great. If they don't, I won't lose sleep over it. But I do think that like the thing that was most compelling since episode 1 for me is like this exploration of, and we alluded to this in an episode, episodes ago, that the show doesn't need the trappings of Marvel. It doesn't need the IP. You just need a loss, and the show at its best is just an exploration of like grief and processing losing the person you love, or the people, plural, that you love.
Yeah.
And episode 8, I mean, does a really interesting, kind of, it's almost like a Christmas Carol-y like thing. Like I couldn't not see that Dickensian, like, she's taking her through all these past experiences and they can't see them or hear them, but like, and so I thought that worked really well. And, the bottom line for me is that Elizabeth Olsen is destroying. Like I just don't even, I haven't seen somebody, again, nail all of the, like, she has to hit all the nostalgia beats, right? Like the 60s or the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And then even in this episode, or even in episode 7, she really does like fall into the mode, and the timing and the writing's good too. But it feels like Modern Family or something.
Right.
It feels like that. And she nails it. And I don't know a lot of actors who I would be able to say, you just pop them in any one of those kinds of shows and they do great. Not to mention the dramatic heft, right? Like there's a line between Vision and her in one of these flashbacks that could easily be kind of like just lathered on and melodramatic, and it works because she sells it. It's that, okay, let me see if I can try not to butcher it. It's like, hope is just grief persevering or something like that. Is that it?
Well, it's I know it's what he says to her,
Yes,
right?
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just a moment that these actors bring some gravitas to something that I don't know. I can imagine insert column A Marvel actor, even Scarlett Johansson with what they typically give her in these movies. Not that I don't think she's up to the task, but they normally just give her stupid stuff to say and then she runs around and punches people. This is a pretty ambitious set of scripts that they've had to handle. And Paul Bettany's really good, and Elizabeth Olsen's really good.
And Catherine Hahn. I mean, her range is incredible when she does the turn as the villain. It's not caricaturish, She really, as much as you can, she pulls off a believable Marvel witch.
Yeah.
Which is quite a stretch, I feel like, even for Marvel. Although, frankly, I don't know what's not, with how far out they've expanded their cinematic universe now, as far as time periods and characters and aliens and what's possible. I don't know I don't know that they're gonna stop at any length at this point, dude. I feel like it may be to their detriment. I think they may finally reach that point where there's enough, because you and me are the outliers, right? Like we've talked about. Yeah, we enjoy watching Marvel movies and some superhero stuff, but we're also not we're not going to be there at the midnight showing for these movies anymore.
No.
We may have been once upon a time.
Did we ever do that? Did we ever go to a Marvel midnight thing? I don't think.
Like you and me together, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
Weekend of, I think earlier on I probably did. I mean, we went and saw Endgame together, but it was probably a month after it came out, and it was still crazy packed. And we sat there and just were like, okay, I guess that was the movie.
Yeah, and I think that has something to do with what we really like about WandaVision, and maybe listeners kind of notice what we like about movies is give us a movie that is not just about spectacle is fun, right?
Right.
But spectacle is not really human existence. And so anything that is more concerned with, like in WandaVision, about grief, for example, we're all going to experience grief in our lives. So if you give us something that we can latch onto and be like, yeah, I can relate to that, I'm going to way more want to invest my time in that and frankly have something to discuss about it than a movie where a guy what's our joke about Thanos? He looks like a purple thumb or something.
Yeah, like a giant thumb with arms and legs. Yeah.
Right. It's just it's not as interesting,
Yeah. And the attempts to I think this is, again, we mentioned this early on. I did not care about these two characters one iota before this series.
Yeah.
They were so afterthoughts in the big movies. And, the fact that they have made me care about them is a testament to the concept and the execution. But when you take Thanos and you make him Easter eggs for 6 movies, and then you're but now we're going to apply layers and nuance and Josh Brolin make it work with no real ability to act because mocap is useless in many of his scenes. It's it just is it's silly, and
it is.
This has heart and soul first, and then the spectacle stuff we can kind of roll our eyes at or look past, because the stuff that is most important in the showrunner's eyes is the most substantive too for us.
Yeah.
And like you alluded to, it's relatable. At some point the detached from real life events and stuff becomes it very hard to relate to. I don't know, in Ant-Man, for instance, right? There's some father-son stuff in there, but more often than not, it's okay, let's take our superhero and match him up against the same thing but bad version.
Yes.
And that's it just doesn't.
And that problem started from the beginning of this universe, right? The Iron Man movies could never really get over
bad Iron Man. Yes.
Yeah, that's his only foil.
Yeah.
And frankly the weak spot of
comic books. Let's be honest. These aren't characters that are made up. They're just taking the comic book villains and popping them in the movies. So yeah, that's what's interesting about this show is there isn't an anti-hero villain archetype that's just the opposite. It is really about Wanda and about Wanda and how Vision is affected by her, but really they keep her at the center, and I think that's a strength. So yeah,
absolutely.
episode 7 and 8, good enough for me. I mean,
And to your point about Scarlett Johansson, we're now at time of recording anyway. We're a couple months away from the Black Widow movie finally getting released. After yeah,
but Russia, yes,
that's pretty much the music from the trailer, right? And so again, it's like that movie, like this show, like WandaVision, they've got all the cast they need to make that amazing, right?
Yeah.
They've got Scarlett Johansson, they've got Rachel Weisz, and they've got David Harbour, and it's like there's in terms of talent and money behind there's no reason why that couldn't be amazing, because just like this show has seen fit to examine, like, hey, what if we just thought about how freaking sad Wanda is for a few episodes, and maybe that'd actually be interesting. Well, in the same way, like, we know that Scarlett Johansson's character is dead now.
Or whatever.
Thank you. Yeah, that she's actually dead, which was also stupid. We'll have to gripe about that some other time.
Oh my god, we could do a 4-hour episode on Endgame.
Yeah,
and it would be almost as long as the movie.
Like a play-by-play.
Yeah.
But that character, just like Wanda, there is so much like interesting, trauma and just character, the interworkings of her mind and her past life. I mean, there's a lot of meat we could chew on.
Yeah.
And Scarlett Johansson is way freaking up to the task of acting, as we've talked before on this podcast. So, but alas, if you've seen the trailer for Black Widow, I have a feeling that's not what we should be expecting.
It's how shall we say this? It's pre-WandaVision. And I think the real issue with that one, and I guess anything could be great, but the corner they've written themselves into is we know where she ends up. So it's not like she can land in a place that's surprising. She has to end up being the Natasha Romanoff we meet in what, like the Avengers, or when does she pop up? Who cares?
I think Iron Man 2, actually, doesn't she?
Maybe.
I think it's Iron Man 2.
45 movies ago, yes.
Right. She has a different hairstyle than everyone.
Yeah, well, and that's her greatest character trait in those movies. It's like new costume, new hairstyle, new moves. New boyfriend, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
anyway.
Well... shall we move on from WandaVision? What else did you watch?
I watched with my children, who were very excited. We watched the new Mulan.
Yeah,
Disney's latest non-animated version and non-musical version. I mean, there's a wonderful score which takes a lot of the themes and the music from the original movie, but it just weaves it in pretty distinctly, though. When it's there. As kind of an homage, but man, this movie
is it Michael Giacchino, because like he does everything for Disney, and he's
I don't know.
I'm gonna look while you're talking about it.
Go ahead and look it up and come back to us when you found the answer.
I'll mosey on back.
Yeah. And this movie is really from the first frames, man. The way that this story is being told, I hope that it kind of ushers in a new era for Disney movie storytelling, at least in the live action sense. And the reason I say that is like the first couple scenes are like just Mulan's father narrating while we get like a flashback of Mulan as a kid, practicing martial arts essentially by herself. And it's very like Terrence Malick gets thrown around too much. But I mean, it's frankly, there's some kind of Terrence Malick sensibility in the way that's shot. And it's just not... It's not how Disney movies start, man. There's no great, like, oh, everything's happy and then big tragedy, like your dad dies is usually what happens in the first 5 minutes or something. It's not that movie at all. And to its credit. Now, this is still a Disney movie, and it is still, you remember when we talked about that episode of The Mandalorian where Boba Fett comes back and it's pretty freaking violent for the Mandalorian world?
Brutal,
so
yes.
This movie is not that brutal, but it is definitely more violent than other Disney movies. But it totally it's fine. I mean, I'm not saying it's like offensive or anything or inappropriate for kids, frankly. But it is definitely more. There's not like blood and guts flying anywhere. This is not Inglourious Bastards or something. But it's because of the way that they've done the cinematography and especially some of the choreography for the martial arts. They kind of have owed it to themselves to make it a little more realistic.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting movie. I would say the weak points of this movie are the way, I know you haven't seen it yet, but I feel like I gotta kind of divulge some of the secret sauce.
I mean, it's been out for months. Just spoil away.
Okay, so the choreography is amazing, and some of the martial arts stuff though in this movie, it's very like wuxia, like it's a little bit fantasy.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. I love wuxia. You know, like I don't have a problem with that as a concept. The way that it's done here, I think it's done so that it feels very like family friendly, but it's also kind of, I don't want to say cheesy. It just doesn't tonally quite jive, because you have some stuff that's very grounded, and then all of a sudden you have somebody like doing something that's obviously on a green screen.
Right.
So again, like when crazy stuff like that happens in wuxia, it really works if you have like Ang Lee doing a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon thing, and it's just like, wow, that you know, that looks good. And it doesn't look so good when it's like green screen, you know, and you're flipping over a horse or something. But you know, it kind of comes with the territory. I'm not gonna say like it's shocking, but it's frankly probably more of a critique from my angle because of how good the rest of the movie is.
Yeah.
The end of this movie is so strong. I won't waste the end for you. I'll just tease it a little bit, Travis, because I think you should go watch it.
I'm going to.
But the end, there is something that is said by a character, and I thought, oh my gosh, they have just opened up the possibility that this movie will end there. And then I was like, oh, that's too stupid, Justin. This is a Disney movie. They're going to do. And then it ends.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, man. All right, Disney. Way to go. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Really, Donnie Yen is in it. And, you know, we do get to see his actual choreographed martial arts stuff, which is always fun. Jet Li plays a minor part in it. And I don't know if you know, Jet Li's had some health problems. I think he has hyperthyroidism.
He stopped texting me a couple weeks ago. So
did he really?
Yeah.
What a jerk.
He's icing me, that guy.
Yeah. Wow. So anyway, he's got some. So you know, you kind of. I don't know if this movie is just trying to subvert expectations in a good way by not having him get like, it's freaking Jet Li. I'd kind of like to see him do his stuff, but that we don't really ever get that.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's because of limitations based on his health, or just because like that's not the point of the story.
Right.
Either way is okay with me, but it was just interesting. So anyway, that little Jet Li aside to say, it's definitely worth your time, and a credit to the story of Hua Mulan. I think to the legend. I mean,
awesome.
That's as good as Disney is going to get that story. I think so.
Awesome.
Glad
to hear it. Yeah. The only thing I know of this movie is that it was one of the last trailers I saw on the big screen before movie theaters became not a thing for quite some time.
Right.
And I remember watching it thinking like, I have two daughters and you do as well. And I've seen the Beauty and the Beast remake and the Lion King remake, and they are hot garbage. Like so bad that I was like, oh man, I really don't want to see another one of these like, cash grabby. And then I saw the trailer and it was like, it slapped in the theater. Like the music was incredible and the choreography looks great. It just looks like a real movie, not just like, hey, remember this cartoon you used to love? Well, now it's Emma Watson. It's like, I don't know. So I'm excited to watch it, and excited. That's a word. Would you say you're excited to move on from this our longest what did we watch this week's segment?
Whoops, sorry, I just dropped Mulan.
You can put that gun away and don't bother loading it. It's going to be okay. Yeah.
Okay. Am I excited? Man, Travis, I wonder if there's any corollary between how long it took us to discuss this and what's going to come after. I mean, I guess we should just end it on a cliffhanger, right?
Perhaps. Let's get into 1963's classic the Pink Panther. In a section, we will intro the film called Hatching the Plan.
What's in the case?
That information isn't necessary.
Is it heavy? Is it explosive? Is it chained to some unlucky bloke's wrist? We're gonna have to chop it off?
All right.
What is it?
What in the bag she gave you?
She didn't give me a bag. Melanie was not a part of the plan.
Oh, no, we can get through the rock. No worries there. Easiest thing in the world. Why, we just blow right through it.
10 ought to do it, don't you think? You think we need one more? You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more.
All right. Well, hatching the plan for this film includes giving some real context because this movie is the first in a long-running franchise that you may know from any number of decades and a couple different lead actors of note and many lead actors who no one wants you to remember, frankly. But before we get into the specific film that we watched this week, the Pink Panther series is an interesting one because it started way back in 1963 with this film, and the original star of the film was actually supposed to kind of be David Niven, not Peter Sellers. And Peter Sellers, from anecdotal, reports that I've heard, was hired literally the Friday before the Monday they started shooting, and the movie changed in real time. And David Niven kind of thought this was his star vehicle, and when you watch it, it kind of makes sense that he would think that based on the lopsided screen time he has in the story. But Peter Sellers and producer Blake Edwards, who originated this character and really had his hand in the whole series, they just started ad-libbing and adding physical humor and making it what it would become to great success and long-running series success. And what we ended up with is the movie we watched today, The Pink Panther 1963. Now, before we pick nits about this movie, the next movie is called A Shot in the Dark. That came less than a year after this was filmed. So they saw success and they turned that truck around and dumped out another one, released less than a year from the time the first one hit theaters, which is insane to think about. Like that is certainly an old school way of doing things, and it doesn't really get done anymore. Marvel makes us wait, 2 years between big movies and gives us the sort of sub movies between, and Star Wars is kind of the same thing. And all the franchises that we live with, Bond and all those big ones, they don't do it in less than a year. That's insane. The next movie, called Inspector Clouseau in '68, Peter Sellers walked away from, and Blake Edwards walked away from, and Henry Mancini. Oh my gosh, I just read that too. And they hired an actor who seemed to be just a cracking good pick for this part, Alan Arkin, who I love. Alan Arkin.
Yeah, me too.
And almost everything I've seen him in. And when you think back to 1968, you think he's in Wait Until Dark, and he's like incredible in that movie.
Yeah.
And then just everything he's in, he's quite good in. And this is a real stinker from what I've read. I haven't sat down and watched it yet, but it was a flop. It was panned by critics and audiences. And then they put it on the shelf for a while, and they said maybe that's enough Clouseau. Well, 1975 rolls around, and they bring back the old crew: Blake Edwards, Peter Sellers. They bring in Christopher Plummer, and have the return of Clouseau as we know him. Sort of George Lazenby does Bond for one film, and then they bring back Roger Moore. Is that how that worked? Was it Roger Moore or no?
I think they brought Connery back.
Connery
again,
came back
they?
after. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
Same type of deal. And then they had the return of the Pink Panther, which was very successful, and bore another sequel, The Pink Panther Strikes Again, the next year in '76, and then Revenge of the Pink Panther in '78, and then Romance of the Pink Panther, which was to be written by Peter Sellers, but due to hostility between Sellers and Blake Edwards, the producer, Edwards said, "I'm not going to direct the film." And each of the 2 different endings they wrote happened before Peter Sellers' death, and then they brought in Dudley Moore to play Clouseau, but Edwards decided to choose a new character instead. So that doesn't even involve Inspector Clouseau. And then the weirdest stuff is still to come. Trail of the Pink Panther, 1982. This is a movie that is made, pieced together with footage that has been unused from previous films. So they just took Peter Sellers' stuff that got left on the cutting room floor, and Blake Edwards said, we got enough. We'll throw a movie together. Well, that's really, distasteful to say the least. So distasteful that he was sued by the wife of the late Peter Sellers for, I think, $1.5 million or something. And then they made a couple after that didn't have Blake Edwards at his best, I would say. One of them had Roger Moore in it. That's The Curse of the Pink Panther in '83. And then there's something called The Son of the Pink Panther in '93 with Roberto Benigni as the long lost bastard child of Inspector Clouseau. This is insane. This is an insane production history. It's bonkers. And the one we're talking about today is the one that gave birth to all that. And the reason we say this is because I think, Justin, we have an idealized sort of expectation of how like fun and memorable the Pink Panther movies are. Is that your experience? Like you remember them fondly?
Oh, absolutely. I think I've probably seen all of them except for the son of the Pink Panther. I never got to see that lovely piece of cinema. And, you know, I don't think I've seen the newer ones with Steve Martin, as they weren't really very well reviewed.
I've seen the first one with him. And
okay.
I'll save my thoughts on it, but
okay.
it's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, as a kid, you know, especially, you know, I mean, the stuff that is funny in these movies is what's always going to be funny, right? And namely that being Peter Sellers' antics as Inspector Clouseau. But you know, honestly, if you step back and go, okay, well, you know, take the stuff that's funny with Jacques Clouseau and remove that from any of these movies, and what do you have? And I think the answer is ranging from bland to nothing.
Right.
And so the idea that this franchise is just like full of so much great humor and is just so hilarious. I mean, again, there is merit to these things. I mean, Peter Sellers is hilarious as Inspector Clouseau. But it's not nonstop. This isn't like, you know, a Monty Python film at their height, you know. This is just a one-man show. And in this first movie, it's not even really about him yet because of the reasons you just alluded to. You know, he's kind of a last-minute addition. He's very much a B character, and one that isn't really, the character hasn't really evolved to the kind of ludicrous heights that he later does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my kids have seen this movie, actually, The Pink Panther, and the stuff that is funny about this movie is the only stuff, you know, I mean, they still talk about it, you know. Oh, you remember when Clouseau shoots the roof, you know?
Right.
It was so silly. You know, that stuff is what is going to be timeless and what works about these movies. But frankly, I think their reputation is a bit overblown.
Yeah.
Because, you know, again, okay, so the actual The Pink Panther, like that iconic character, you know, like the cartoon,
yeah,
right? That's at least partially created by what's that guy's name that made, you know, Bugs Bunny and that animator,
Mel Blanc.
Isn't Mel? I thought he started with an F, but anyway, you're probably right.
Fritz Friedling. Fritz.
Yes, that guy.
Fritz
that
Friedling.
guy.
Those are the two guys. I was close.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. But anyway, so like the character is iconic. The little intro, the cartoon intros are silly, but the music by Henry Mancini, I mean, that's incredible. You know, and that's probably the best part of these movies.
Any of them? Yeah. Okay. So before we get into the nitty gritty of 63, so our background I think is kind of similar. I think you've seen way more of these than me, but I definitely watched enough of them to have that fondness and have that nostalgia and build it up really in my mind. And maybe not having watched them for freaking 20 years almost is right. enough to keep the memory alive. Suffice it to say, I killed that memory earlier today.
It's dead.
It's dead and gone. But my other experience with this franchise and character is I played Clouseau in a play in high school, and you know had a great time with it. Like it's a script it's an adaptation of the Strikes Again, where Dreyfus, the commissioner, is literally driven insane by how bumbling he is, and Dreyfus is the villain, and that's like a fun kind of a setup for this style of movie, you know, where the guy who was good has been literally clinically, you know, made crazy because Clouseau is so frustrating. And I thought it was hilarious when I was a high schooler, and I still think that the play script that I remember and the jokes and the sequences and that and what they do with Clouseau is so much more valuable to somebody watching it, you know, than what we watched as a preview of our thoughts. But yeah, let's just say, you know, you've got David Niven in what is ostensibly the lead role, and then Peter Sellers as Jacques Clouseau, and then who else do you want to mention as actors here? There's a few.
Yeah, Claudia Cardinal is the princess that has the Pink Panther. Maybe a bit miscast. I don't know. We'll probably get to spaghetti westerns one day in the series, I hope. Whenever I see her, I'd always think of Once Upon a Time in the West. Capucine plays Peter Sellers' wife.
Yes.
And she actually, I found her to be a real, like, I haven't seen her, and I'm not sure if I've seen her in anything else. Although I know she does show up in the son of the Pink Panther, I think, too. Which
and
is
The
like,
Curse. I'm just looking at her credits now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's like right before she died. A little dark note. But Robert Wagner is in there too, right?
Yeah, Robert Wagner. Yep.
Yeah, so I mean there's plenty of talent to go around, but in that there's a scene where all these characters are watching, I think it's Claudia Cardinal's character who's like dancing and singing a song.
Right.
And it's like it's a perfect example of what this movie is, because it's like, this is a great song and I have no problem with the vocal talents of the actress singing this, but all this other talent is just sitting around dumbly smiling or what's going on? And that is this movie. It's like, what we have this great idea. What are we doing? And the answer is like a big fat question mark, I think.
I think that's right. All right. Well, let's get into it in the content portion where we get into, the philosophical underpinnings of what the film is trying to say to us. And in this case, since it's a heist movie, we call this section the goods.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
I want to take over his operation, and I need you to help me break it.
What to do to me, eh? I've got Jessel's money.
I thought it was understood that when it came to our little enterprise, Mom was the word.
And when we say heist movie, I think we're using that word reasonably liberally in this case, because it's not really a heist movie. I don't even know what kind of movie it really is after having watched it. A diamond does in fact get stolen, and there is a thief, and other than those two loosely held heist components, this is more of a comedy that takes itself a little too seriously. Do your best, Justin, here to give us the log line version of the plot. Just like what happens in this movie.
This is a wannabe comedy drama that concerns a princess that holds an invaluable diamond and a middle-aged playboy who is also a jewel thief who is trying to get it from her amidst many silly antics in the Italian Alps or something.
That's it.
Yeah, it's man, and that's all you need to know, folks. Change the channel, Again, I can't recommend this movie to myself. It really was. I did try to watch this movie again, like I've seen this movie a few times, so I was going to watch it again right before we started recording just to refresh myself, and I couldn't. I made it through a few minutes, and I was like, I can't do this. So that's probably not a good sign that it's excellent filmmaking.
Okay, so. Well, I'm going to try to be as nice as I can because, we come here to appreciate film and not to rag on it. But we did this to ourselves, gosh darn it. And my first note is, and let's get this out of the way. You alluded to it. Henry Mancini rules. This is such a good piece of writing from a composer, and it's so fun and so iconic. And it is the most interesting character in this movie. I'm not going to say that for, maybe when Peter Sellers starts to hit his stride in some later films or whatever. Yeah. But it's just like the credit sequence is so like 60s-tastic, and the animation is awesome. You see that influence a myriad of things. I can't see the Pink Panther credits without thinking about like Monsters Inc. Totally doing a send up of that and lots of other stuff. Let's be transparent with the people, Justin. We weren't originally going to do The Pink Panther.
You've exposed our deepest, darkest
Yeah,
secret.
let's just be real. Let's be real, people.
Let's be real. No, I think because again, like you and me, I had, this movie and A Shot in the Dark I have seen the most out of the Pink Panther series. But, I was like, hey, what if we threw in one of these Pink Panther movies? Maybe not one of the more famous ones, Rookie Mistake. And so which one were we even going to do? I've already, the Revenge?
Return. So it's the first one Peter Sellers did when he came back. Okay. And it was a 70s one. And we were looking at this series, this mini series 1.5, and we were like, let's pick a movie from no two movies from the same decade. That was sort of the goal. Right. And so this was like our 70s flick. And we were like, this seems to be 70s in its own way, and it really was. We started watching this movie, people. We started, and neither of us are what I'd like to classify as quitters. But we both quit. How much of it did I don't think we talked about this. How much of it did you make it through the Return of the Pink
19 minutes, I think.
Oh my gosh, you're a real quitter. I made it through an hour, and let me tell you, my friend.
Well, I quit because of internet issues. I was forced to quit, and then I didn't want to continue once those issues were no longer.
Sounds like an excuse.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, I made it an hour, and this is what I'll say is where this movie, 1963, Pink Panther, it is like not enough zany, not enough Peter Sellers understanding what will make this successful. He is in this character's, shoes, really like the modern day for 1963 Jim Carrey. Like, this movie should just be put him in funny situations and let him do his like physical comedic brilliance, and there's just not enough of that. And that's not, he's not to blame. I don't think Blake Edwards is to blame. They just didn't really know what they had yet. But the other one we started watching is like so much of that and filled in with just long expository plotlessness. Like, if you think this movie is too heavy on plot, the other one found no balance with, like, nothing happens that matters in that movie. Like, it's again, the diamond gets stolen and people wander around and talk to each other about who, this person, that person. And then every once in a while, Peter Sellers makes you laugh. There's a good bit in that one that I don't know if you made it to, but like, he's in disguise as a pool cleaner. And he's in this truck, and he's driving in a mustache and a wig and ridiculousness. And he goes to hit the brake pedal, and the brake pedal just pushes in and stays there. And so he reaches down to pull the handbrake, and he pulls the handbrake, and it comes off the bottom of the car, and he chucks it out the window, crashes it into a pool. That's funny. Just slapstick, funny stuff. And then like 5 minutes later, he's in a different disguise as a telephone repairman. Same exact thing happens. Brake pedal stays in, pulls the handbrake, chucks it out the window. And as he crashes it into the same pool, they're craning out the last truck. Like that's a sight gag that definitely made me laugh and worked. And in this movie, what I found myself doing was like chuckling occasionally at Peter Sellers' more subdued antics. Things like, when he turns the corner to look and he has a glass of milk in his hand and it just goes with him and spills over. Like, that's great. And, just the way he uses like the globe, where the first time you see him, he spins the globe and then he goes to rest his hand on it and it just like sends him towards the ground.
Well, and the pretentiousness of this character, right? Clouseau is not just bumbling, but he has this huge ego too.
He's so serious.
So when he gets up off the ground after that, I mean, because I agree with you, that comedy, the physical comedy of that is genius. Just as it is, he pulls it off, and it's funny. Then he gets back up, and there's another guy in the room, and he immediately says, "What's that you say?"
Yeah,
and it's just like the inability of that character to
laugh at
himself. You can't take him seriously in any direction.
Yeah,
and so that's the strength of the character. But yeah, I would agree. It's not really, they haven't figured out the way for him to get to the point where he can just lean all the way into that, like those gags you were just talking about from the Return of the Pink Panther. So you get the milk scene and him like stepping on the pills and things, and that's about as good as it gets, unfortunately.
Yeah, and like plot wise, we could tell you everything that happens, but it would probably put you to sleep.
Why?
Like like it's like, okay, David Niven's a thief, and there's a thing that doesn't make any sense to me at all, and maybe I'm ignorant and I wasn't paying close enough attention, but
probably not.
Yeah, fair enough. His wife, right? Clouseau's wife, they've been married for 10 years. Like, they say that. And yet, she's either decided after 10 years of putting up with Jacques Clouseau that she's going to double cross him and get the money and go run off with David Niven's character, Sir Charles Lytton. Or she's playing this 10-year long con. Like, she's just been married to this guy and has been double crossing him for, like, I just don't, that plot point doesn't really make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't.
David Niven's attempt to like seduce the princess character is, it's just like so drawn out, and like I didn't find it like overtly like super creepy or anything. It's just so like blah, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of this is. Just, it's like, it's the saltine cracker of movies. It's not quite ridiculous enough to be funny consistently, and the plot is certainly not interesting enough to grab you.
Well, it's probably about an hour too long, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's 2 hours.
And it's got just all these other like Robert Wagner's character. So the beginning of this movie is like, you know, very quickly within like 3 or 4 different time zones around the world, right? We're watching the diamond getting stolen. We're in Italy. No, now we're in Paris. Now we're in Hollywood. And it's like, oh, okay, wow, this could be interesting setup. And it's really...
It's acting like it's going to move there.
Right, and it never does.
No.
So, like, for instance, Robert Wagner's character as the nephew or whatever of Sir Charles Lytton, I mean, that character brings no value to the proceedings, really, at all. Just extra exposition and extra convolution, unfortunately, which is a bummer because it's Robert Wagner, for one. But there's just no, like, I didn't find that whole subplot. And then there's the weirdness where, like, you know, Clouseau's wife is cheating on him with Sir Charles, but then there's also the weirdness of, like, if she's going to sleep with his nephew, which is just kind of gross.
That gets messy.
Yeah. It's not funny. They don't even play it for laughs. It's just kind of disgusting.
Yeah, because the nephew comes off as gross, and the wife comes off as, like, you know, she's not a good person, but just like, I don't know what they're doing there. It's a lot of, like, it feels like it wants to be, and I think there's one sequence that brings this out. It feels like it wants to be like a comedy of manners at times, you know, like the bedroom sequence is maybe the most interesting, with like chess pieces moving around, and, like, you know, David Niven's character is there, and then the nephew comes in and he's hot to trot, and he wants to, you know, get in bed with her, and so then they all have to hide, and then Clouseau comes back and she has to hide both of them, and so there's some kind of fun antics. But it honestly, like, it doesn't really,
it underwhelms.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And so does the movie.
It feels like this movie is you remember, I think we've both seen Monuments Men, right? George Clooney's heist movie. We're not going to do that one either.
I almost would rather at this point, but yeah.
Right. But that movie maybe has a lesser problem of this movie, but both of these, Monuments Men and this Pink Panther movie, feel like the movie feels like a good rough draft of, like, hey, here's my idea for this story. What do you think? And it's like, okay, great. Hey, there's a lot to work with here. Let's fine tune this. This is not really working. But unfortunately for both of those movies, this is the final product.
Yeah, it feels like a dress rehearsal.
Yeah, right, and not a very good one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm like you, Travis. I don't want to. What's the bet? Anybody can come and just crap on a movie.
Yeah.
But I think it is interesting to note, like, that because of how, if you talk about, like, the Pink Panther series to somebody that's ever heard of it, they're probably not going to be like, oh yeah, that's terrible. I really hate the Pink Panther.
Right.
You know, they're probably going to be like, oh yeah, those are pretty funny. And I would say, actually, you know, maybe not.
This is a sketch. You know what I mean? Like, this is a character that you could see on SNL in the 70s or the 80s.
Yes.
Like, you know, they have Peter Sellers as a recurring ridiculous bumbling detective, and they give him a different mystery, and it's a 7 or 8 minute sketch, and he kills. And then a couple weeks later they do another one. And, you know, for that reason alone, like, I think I could probably recommend, like, go watch these 2 scenes on YouTube. They'll give you a chuckle. Honestly, the rest of it is like, I'm not exaggerating when I said, like, the last 30 minutes of this movie almost put me to sleep. Like I was, my eyelids were heavy. Like it just goes and goes and goes. And okay, I honestly, Justin, you can, if you want to halt the train and back up the cargo and, if we missed anything.
No, it's okay. Keep the train, add some more coal to the furnace. The train needs to keep moving.
Chew. Let's talk about the ending because it's just so weird. Like I don't get what is happening here. This is either a movie that's trying to take a slightly more serious turn as an ending and is just awkwardly like thrown in there, or it's a shot at a comedic, ironic moment and it's just like lands like a wet towel. Like which one is it for you?
It's the wet towel. I think it's very much supposed to be, so if you haven't seen the movie, essentially, Clouseau's wife and Sir Charles are like, oh my gosh, we're going to do the Pink Panther. And they're like, oh, that's okay. We'll just pin it on poor Jacques Clouseau. So they concoct this really weak, flimsy plot point where Jacques Clouseau gets put on the stand during the Pink Panther trial. And it's like in his pocket, in his hanky, the Pink Panther diamond, that is.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh my gosh, he's the thief. And because this is a movie like that, of course. And then they put him in the police car and take him away. And it ends with the police officers asking him, like, how'd you do it? And he's like, it wasn't easy, And then they just end the movie. It's a bummer.
And is that Clouseau trying to say, like, well, I can get a little bit of notoriety by just sort of copping to it for a moment? But
I think so.
But you can't create a character who's so staunchly like the good guy, fighting for what's right, gonna catch the bad guy. He always talks about my instincts tell me, what. I just like. Why would he even do that? It doesn't.
Right.
It's so weird.
It doesn't make sense, which is why it falls flat. It's not true to the character. It feels a little evil. Like I get it. I think I do anyway. They're trying to go for comedy. For what if this got turned on its head and the good guy went to jail? Isn't that kind of silly? It doesn't feel silly. It feels really stupid and kind of just like unnecessarily cruel to this really bumbling character. So it's not a good way to end. But end it does, and thank goodness it does, because after 2 hours, I was ready for it to be over.
Absolutely, and I'm ready for this to be over. So let's get to the last section where we discuss what the film is saying in a section we call Time Served.
You want about the law or something?
No, it's okay.
I'm so very sorry. I propose that we consider this matter closed.
I sure hope you didn't do anything stupid, Jackie. See you when I see
you. So, Justin, seen any good movies lately? I got nothing here, man. This is an empty vessel for me. It
is, man. Because at its best, right? There is a really, if you really look for it, man. And I mean, like, you get out your microscope, the movie thinks that it's trying to say some things. For instance, when Sir Charles goes to dinner with the Princess Dala as she's hosting this party at her ski lodge or whatever, in Cortina d'Ampezzo. I think I got the correct Carpathian pronunciation.
Yeah,
there.
That's it.
And she makes this really biting observation about him and kind of asserts her own agency, like, hey, I'm in other words, right, she's saying I'm not just, a pretty face for you or a conquest opportunity or something. You are a middle-aged man who's running around trying to sleep with women, and to me that makes you not a man. It's a paraphrase of what she says.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. However, it's just a ruse, because later, 30 minutes or an hour or 10 centuries later, I forget how long this movie is, she is like sloppy drunk, even though she's told him she doesn't drink, and he is like ready to take advantage of her. And I mean, the movie is like really trying to have its cake and eat it too, I think. So there's really, that is representative, I think, of the opportunities, comedic and dramatic, that the movie has to say something or to do something.
Yeah.
And it's a strikeout, I think.
Yeah, it's 4 strikeouts, which is what they call the golden sombrero in baseball. And
right, the golden sombrero.
Yeah.
What could be worse?
It's certainly. How often would we rewatch this? I'm not going to watch this ever again because
nope,
it wasn't fun to watch. It was 2 hours of my life, and it certainly doesn't. I don't need a wacky comedy to say everything that the Asphalt Jungle did, but I think there's a good argument to be made here that if you just kept the comedic timing and the goal of the film, the goal of the storytelling consistent, you could actually say one thing reasonably well. A guy like Clouseau, who is so bumbling and yet so staunchly serious, like he at least is a character who represents good, and he finds his way to triumph over the bad. But that doesn't happen. The opposite happens.
Right.
So, I would say no, it's not time well served, and you should put your head in a vice before you watch it again. What about you?
Yep, my head's already there. I'm just waiting for you to turn the screws on me, dude.
Okay,
Let's go.
Let me just grab those screws and.
Okay, go ahead. Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow.
Okay. All right, well, that was a fun one. Yeah, we're going to have I have a feeling, very different conversation next week. This is Michael Mann's feature debut, Thief, 1981, starring James Caan. I'm not a betting man, but I have a good feeling about this one. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, me too, man. And frankly, it doesn't have a very high bar to jump over compared to this, so
Fair
I'm excited.
enough. Yeah. We both love Heat and some other Michael Mann stuff, and we both love James Caan. So we hope you'll join us again next week, and we'll see a heist in action. See you then. Bye.
Goodbye.
Let the movie speak.
Hey, since you're still here and still listening, thank you, by the way, we'd like to ask an additional favor of you.
We have social media. It's a thing on the internet, and all you need to do is find us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook and like and subscribe. I know this is annoying, but we have to ask you because we want more people to hear the show. In addition to that, if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, we would greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye.